As coaches, we know that some of the biggest hurdles to our team's success can come from off the field. Your team needs support to tackle the endless list of expenses, uniforms, training equipment, travel, and more. But raising that money can feel like a full-time job. Thankfully, there's Vertical Raise. Vertical Raise is the premier online fundraising platform using innovative technology to create the easiest and most efficient system available. Raise more money in less time with a local fundraising coach who works with your team every step of the way to customize the ideal fundraiser. With options for online donations, digital discount cards, premium product sales, and even spirit shops, Vertical Raise has top-of-the-line solutions for every fundraising style. To find out more, visit verticalraise.com and we'll get you connected with an exclusive offer on your first fundraiser. All coaches aspire to be champions, and this time of year is when you set that vision for your team. By now, listeners of this podcast know about signature championship rings and have met some of the signature champion coaches who partner with them to celebrate their achievements. Reputable, affordable, first-class customer service are just some of the ways we keep hearing coaches describe signature championship rings. So as you're ramping up this summer for the upcoming season, create a championship vision for your team now using the design tool at signaturechampions.com/podcast. Give your team a visual to motivate their pursuit of a championship in 2024. And when your team has a championship moment to celebrate, we highly recommend consulting with Signature Championship Rings.
We're going inside them. We're going outside them. Inside them and outside them. Fight, 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 fight. What do you say, man?
Thing to do isn't to punch them, isn't to talk to them. There's only one way you get respect, and that's by looking somebody in the eye for 60 minutes.
It was a great game for college football.
And Notre Dame is going to go for 2 points. They're going to try to win it. Steenberge is going back to throw. He throws the end zone. It's caught by Siena. Notre Dame has taken the lead over Purdue.
But the older you get, the more you realize that if you have character and integrity, it takes away 2 things out of your life. It takes away fear and it takes away guilt. Because if you have character, you have no fear because you got nothing to hide. And if you have integrity, there's no guilt because you're always doing what's right.
Our conversation today on Kileleni To the Summit is with Jim Lyall. If you've coached Division III football, you're certainly familiar with the name. Longtime Adrian College coach. He was there from 1974 to 2009. The head coach there from 1990 to 2009. And then from there he went on to Siena Heights to start the football program and coach the first year of that program, get that university started there. So, and Patrick, tell us about Jim Lyall, how you met him, and some of the experiences you've had with him at Global Football.
Jim is just one of my best buddies. One of the real blessings of my job with Global Football is I get to hang out with guys like Jim Lyall in unique places around the world. Not sure how we met, probably at the coaches convention, but when we met, we hit it off right away. He was playing for Bo because I was playing for Eric. He's 1 year younger than me, and I remind him of that often. That senior mentor, you know. But Jim is just an awesome guy. Offensive lineman on teams that had incredible offensive linemen at Michigan. And then he got into coaching, and we met at the convention, I believe. And then in 2002, early on, he took his Adrian college team to Spain. And it was a very educational element. The rule still exists where student athletes in colleges can actually borrow for their trip based upon the percentage of funding they get from the school. So if the kid is a 30% funded student athlete, he can borrow 30% of his funds to go to Spain, things like that. Now, they take a professor with them, but I really like that element of it, that they had a professor lady who went along and taught about Spain and Hemingway and lots of literature that was there. So that is Jim Lyall's personality. And then we went a number of times when he was at Adrian, then he moved over to Siena Heights. He took them, and Jim is just such a unique character. He invited his women's soccer team to come along with us And so we were in Siena, Italy, a beautiful, beautiful town, and we played a doubleheader sports day up there with Adrian women's soccer team getting beat by the Italian team of Siena. And then Coach Lyall's Siena Heights team defeated a team from the Siena area, from Italy, coached by John Makovic, who was a pretty big-time coach himself at Texas, at Illinois, and he was coaching the Italian national team. But Lyall had that idea, so he just so many moments with him. One morning it was like 6:30 in the morning, and we're having a practice outside of Florence, Italy. And anybody who's been there, Florence is in the Arno Valley, so a big river valley, centuries and centuries of history going there. And guys are doing their stretching, kind of laying back on the grass, the damp moisture from the night before. And Jim Lyall goes, gentlemen, listen. And there was a ringing of the bell from the big Duomo Cathedral in Florence, probably 20 miles away. But you could hear that bell ring. It would just go clang, clang. And Coach Lyall goes, that bell has rung in this valley for 800 years, 1,000 years, 1,200 years. And we are here today, gentlemen. We are here with Siena Heights University football, and we're in the Arno Valley. To think of how blessed you are. And that's just the guy Jim Lyall is. I think you'll really enjoy his stories and his thoughts on football.
Yeah, definitely great stories in this one. And for our listeners, Patrick and I will be back at the end for our Winning Edge takeaways. Here's Patrick's conversation with Jim Lyall, which he called Hair on Fire. I've always been interested in the use of technology to make our jobs more effective, so I'm excited to continue sharing modern football technology with you here on the podcast. This innovative system leverages tendencies to improve self-scouting, game planning, and in-game decision-making at the speed of the game. Modern football stands out because it's a battle-tested platform used by teams at all levels, like four-time national champion Bishop Gorman, the five-time California state champion Folsom Bulldogs, six-time Texas state champion Lake Travis, Cal football, and the CFL's Grey Cup champions, the Montreal Alouettes. So book a demo today to see why these teams trust modern football technology. Visit www.teammofo.com/demo and mention Coach and Coordinator Podcast or use the coupon code CC10 to receive 10% off your first year.
Today, my guest, a longtime friend, Coach Jim Lyall, St. James, as I call you. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Patrick. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. You home in Cleveland, Ohio today?
I am, and it's a beautiful sunny day. We took a walk earlier on the shores of Lake Erie. It was beautiful.
Yes, and you and I are about the same age and about the same era as a while ago, but I know you grew up in Cleveland. I grew up down the road there in Erie, Pennsylvania. We both attended pretty good Catholic high schools. And then you matriculated to the University of Michigan, got to play for a man named Bo Schembechler. How did you find your way to Michigan from Cleveland, Jim?
Well, as you know, back in that time, we were allowed to take several visits, and instead of the 5 that most people take now. But I had an opportunity to visit Ann Arbor and sit and talk with Bo and my recruiting coach, a guy by the name of Jerry Hanlon. And I just fell in love with the place, the beauty of Ann Arbor, the quad. They took us to the Law Quad. I thought it was fabulous. Being from Ohio, that year, it was 1969, Michigan had upset the team of the century, as the Bucks called themselves at the time, beat them 24-12. So Michigan was certainly riding high, nationally. And I just thought it was the best place for me.
Every player is impacted by coaches, and we'll get into your own coaching career here in a bit, but give me some background on Bo Schembechler and how he treated guys like you, how he may have impacted your life looking back now.
Well, Patrick, there's 2 things that he talked about all the time, and it was character and integrity. And, when you're talking to 18 to 21-year-olds, it takes a while for that to really sink in. But the older you get, the more you realize that if you have character and integrity, it takes away two things out of your life. It takes away fear and it takes away guilt. Because if you have character, you have no fear because you got nothing to hide. And if you have integrity, there's no guilt because you're always doing what's right. And those are some guiding principles that the older you become, the more you want to pass it on and you want to break it down and give it to the, young men that you're coaching. So those are the two pillars that I tried to put into my life and into my coaching.
Well, and those hold up. We're talking right now about football, and it obviously expands into other sports, but within families, within work cultures, within business, within everything. There couldn't be a stronger message from a guy like Bo. And from the outside, I don't even think I ever met him, but he was this gruff, tough, rough and tumble, in your face kind of guy. But I imagine he had another side. What other sides did you get to know about him, Jim?
Well, as we grew older, our freshman year, to be honest with you, we were all playing demo at the time. All the freshmen, we were not eligible for NCAA play at the time. So he scared the living hell out of us. He was bigger than life. Here's the guy who stood up to Woody Hayes and beat him. As a sophomore, it was difficult because we weren't playing that much. But junior and senior year, you really started to understand, that he treated everyone the same and he demanded your best. Patrick, there was one time I was doing my student teaching. Now, you have to understand, this is second semester of my senior year when, I'm done with football now. But he came with me. I was doing student teaching at a place called Mott Children's Hospital. And it was a center for adolescents and younger kids that had progressive and degenerative diseases. And without any fanfare, there were no TV stations there. There were no reporters there. There was nobody doing any videography or taking pictures. He went with me from room to room and shook the hands of those kids in those hospital beds and spent time with them. Honestly, we spent the entire day. No one ever knew about that, but I was telling this story to a group of parents and scholar athletes. Several years later, after I got done with my talk, a man came up to me, had to be in his late 40s, and he said, "Coach Lyall, I was one of those kids in that hospital bed, and I have a football signed by Bo Schembechler, Dave Gallagher, who was a great All-American and first-round draft pick, Mike Lantry, who was an All-American, and then me." And I said, well, I'm sure I kind of devalued that, that football, but the other three were solid.
Well, that's a side of Bo that was not promoted, and it's great that he didn't care about that. Now, as I recall, you had some great years, wasn't it? Did you only lose one game, Michigan, in those 3 years?
That's correct. Only lost one game and never lost a home game in that entire time. So it was my senior class, Patrick, is the winningest, percentage-wise, the winningest senior class in the history of the winningest college football program, in the history of college football. So we're very proud of that.
That's definitely something to be proud of. Tell us about maybe a couple of your guys, because I know, we've all played on teams and there's always some individual stars, but we know what it takes to win that many games, to be that successful is a team effort. Can you talk about maybe somebody who, really exemplified that on your team?
Certainly when we were freshmen, I was playing defensive demonstration squad, demo as everybody called it. And I would line up every day against a guy by the name of Reggie McKenzie, who played for years with the Buffalo Bills, was on several all-pro teams. Next to him was Dan Deerdorf, who's in the NFL Hall of Fame. And then next to him was Paul Seymour, who played 8 seasons for the Buffalo Bills in the Pittsburgh Steelers. So every day they would block me from Ann Arbor to the neighboring city of Ypsilanti. Then when we finally got our opportunity to play, sophomore year, Tom Darden, Billy Taylor, Frank Gussich, these were great players. But then my senior year, two guys that stand out to me, a guy by the name of Dave Gallagher, who was one of our captains. And I mentioned earlier, he was a first-round draft pick of the Chicago Bears, and Paul Seal. And Paul Seal played several years for the 49ers. But no one ever outworked these guys. They had a great time at practice. They loved it. Dave Gallagher pulled me aside right before the senior game against Ohio State. And he said, "Hey, Jim, I know you might not get in this game, but I want to let you know I'm playing this game for you." And it meant a great deal. We were very close. And he ended up being chosen as the MVP of that game. So he kept his word.
That's pretty special. So you finish up there. How did you get into coaching, which I know you've then done the rest of your career?
Right. Well, I took a job near Ann Arbor at a place called Adrian, Michigan, and I was teaching emotionally impaired students. But the actual site of the classroom was on Adrian College's campus. And it was in the basement of a dorm. And one afternoon, I had the opportunity to meet with a guy by the name of Tom Heckert. Tom was a head football coach there and went on, after his career at Adrian College, went on to scout for the Cleveland Browns, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then the majority of his time, I think about 20 years, was spent with Don Shula and the Miami Dolphins. So he gave me an opportunity to coach the defensive line because that's what I played at Michigan. And, I just caught the bug. I just love being around the kids. I love the coaching lifestyle, and I love the competition on Saturdays.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, how to get 30, how to get 20, 20, 20, how to get 20, 20, how to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
And you coached at Adrian, a Division III school, for many, many years, had great success. And then you went over across town to Siena Heights, right, an NAIA school that was just creating football program. They wanted to get football on their campus, make it part of their whole recruiting system for students by getting student athletes. And they called you. What was that like to actually initiate and develop a program at Siena Heights?
It was really one of the, from a professional standpoint, I'd have to say the highlight of my professional career, because you had an opportunity to build a program based on, the goals and the values of a university. I was born and raised Catholic. This was a Dominican-run university, and they wanted me to bring kids in knowing that they'd be held to a very high standard. So I hired a staff that I knew weren't going to be yes men, people that would challenge me on a consistent basis. And you've met several of them. And what I told them is this: as I send you out to recruit, I want you to ask a very simple question of the high school coaches. Turn the table on them. Ask them, all right, if you were in our position and you were starting a collegiate program, who would you take with you? They didn't have to be your best players. I wanted people with leadership. I wanted people who were overachievers. And the high school coaches loved to have their opinion matter. So we recruited the kids that they said, you want this guy on your team. And I'm telling you, Patrick, it made all the difference. 85% of those kids turned out to be captains. And by the time they were seniors, we had 38 young men on our football team, 38 with a 3.5 or above. And it was just so gratifying. It was, and we won a championship after 3 varsity seasons. We won a championship in the Mid-States Football Conference, which is really one of the top, if not the top, leagues in the NAIA. Right now, I think 8 out of the last 9 national champions have come from that league. So this was unheard of, and it was fun, Patrick. It was a lot of fun.
I'll bet. So you purposely went out and found a whole team of leaders. You said 85% were high school captains. How did all of those leaders, obviously it worked because you won a championship, but were there issues that had to be handled from your end because you had so many leaders, or did they just meld into a team?
Well, I think we got together as a coaching staff and we said, all right, now look, we have to make these guys understand why they're here and why they're special. And it was because they were going to become the very first football team in the history of Siena Heights University. So we brought the team together and we said, one of the most important things that we can do is to acknowledge each other. When we see each other in class, when we see each other on campus, make sure a day doesn't go by where you at least wave at one of your teammates. And we'd start out every team meeting. I'd come in and I'd say, how are you guys doing? I say, good afternoon, men. They'd answer, good afternoon, coach, because we're acknowledging each other. Then I'd ask them, who are we? And they'd reply, the first. And then I'd say, what do we want to become? And they'd answer, champions. And I'd say a very simple question, how are we going to become champions? And they'd say, excellence. Now, we continued that for 3 years. And in their 4th year, I added another question. When we got to the final end, after, we said we were going to be champions, I said, when? And they said, now. And they fulfilled that. And it was, when you work out a plan, and you know what it's like, Patrick, when you plan out a great trip and everything falls into place. And you've been on, the sidelines and in games, you made that great play against Purdue to win. And, you had to be able to see that over and over again in your head before that ever happened. And we would sit outside, the team meeting room, and we'd listen to the kids engage. And they were laughing and they were telling stories. And it was just, you can see it coming together. It was, like I said, the highlight of my professional career.
That's impressive. That's really impressive that you were able to put that together, and really with a sense of urgency is what it seemed like. You then just put that sense of urgency to what was already a sense of excellence, and got it there. So we, the way you and I have gotten to know each other over the years is through our overseas travel with my global football organization. And I have in my mind how we first met and talked, but tell us your story. How did you
it was in a phone call, and it was the Monday after we had just got our butts handed to us by a team. It was Bluffton, that routinely you'd look on the schedule and you say, all right, we should be able to beat Bluffton. Well, they came out and they were in mid-season form. They looked like they had, played 3 or 4 games already. And we were outclassed, to be honest with you. So after the game, I walked over and congratulated Carlin Carpenter, who was the head coach at the time. And I said, Carlin, I've never seen your team better prepared. You guys did a great job. And he said, well, let me tell you what we did. And he went on to explain how, he traveled with you to Spain and was over there. I think they were over there a little longer because they had some community service. But they had 10 or 15 practices, spring practices, which you don't have in Division III. No one has. But because of overseas travel, they were allowed to do this. And at that time, the whole team was able to practice, even if the whole team didn't make the trip. So the very next Monday, I called you. We talked for maybe an hour and a half, maybe longer. And by the time, it was evident to each other that, we at the end, we said, it sounded like we went to separate schools together. So that's how it worked out.
Yeah. And then we started traveling, and, you took your Adrian team every 3 years overseas, which was allowed by NCAA rules. And then when you went to Siena Heights, you got that going there, and we started traveling with Siena Heights, who continues to travel with us now. Tell me, as I recall that Spain trip, and it's funny how I can, I've been to Spain maybe 10 times with different teams, but you had, when you mentioned the service, you also did an educational component. Didn't you have a lady professor who was teaching English literature, something about Hemingway?
That's
am I right?
exactly right, Patrick. You got a great memory. Beth Myers,
Right.
who was a member of our faculty, we also put together a program, and we called it Reality Camp. It was an educational program that we ran along with double sessions. And the freshmen were released, and they were basically, we had volunteers from our faculty come in and basically say, yes, Siena Heights University will change your life if you become a great student. So Beth went with us.
Yeah.
That was part of the whole sales point of this, letting the Adrian College letting us take them. And she taught a class in what was called Hemingway's Barcelona. And they went to a bullfight. They walked the streets of Barcelona, visited some of the places that Hemingway was known to visit on a regular basis. Yeah, and it was, I have some great photos of that. And she remains a close friend to me and my wife to this day.
That's wonderful. In fact, last year I got to go with Luther College out of Iowa. They're another frequent traveler of ours. And we went to Spain and attended a bullfight. And I talked about that story about the Hemingway, and I had been forced to read Hemingway.
Yeah.
Glad I'd done it at that point. Then we've done Italy, I know, a number of times, which is always kind of the most favorite place. Tell me something about Italy you may have.
Well, certainly any time that, you have a chance to visit Rome, and then you have a chance to visit Venice, and then Florence. And, I got to say, I think Florence was one of my favorite cities from the standpoint that as you walk through that corridor right before you get to Ponte Vecchio, you walk through and you see these statues of people that you studied all your life, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci. You have a chance to see Dante, and all these different statues, the actual statue of David, and then the statue of Poseidon. It's just, it takes your breath away. And then you walk out, and then you see the Ponte Vecchio, which was, I believe, one of the only bridges in Italy that was not destroyed during World War II. And it was a beautiful sunshiny day. It was just a fabulous place to be.
Yeah, that brings back wonderful memories. And one of my most vivid of you, Coach, was we were having practice one early morning up in the hills on a grass field, kind of rough and dirt and everything. But as we're starting practice, guys are stretching, and you were always wonderful to walk around your players, giving them some inspiration in the morning if they're stretching, trying to get loosened up. And then the bells started tolling from the Duomo down in the center.
Yeah.
They kind of rang the hills of Tuscany. And you just went into the diatribe, as you've been known to.
Don't sugarcoat it.
Explain that again. Explain that again.
All right. Well, just like you said, I wanted to make sure that the kids had a full awareness of what was going on. So, we started out, by talking about how the sun was shining, the birds were singing, and here we are in the very marrow of the universe. We're in Tuscany, for God's sakes. And, where else would you want to be? All your friends are on. I said, look around. All your friends are here. And then, we were the only team, and I wanted to remind them of that. It didn't matter if you were NAI or NCAA. There was only one team at that point in time that was able to practice and play football, and that was Siena Heights University. That's who we were. And then we just started saying, we had an expression. We used to say we were living the dream, and then we'd abbreviate it by saying LTD. So, with my arms outstretched, I just started chanting LTD, and they answered back LTD. And then it just took over from there. And it was like we were at some concert, LTD, 100 kids chanting LTD. It was fabulous.
It rings right in my brain as you talk about it. You also did something unique, and you and I have done a few unique things here as we go. We got a few more to do still. I remember that you called me one evening and said, hey, our ladies soccer coach is a really good guy, and he loves the fact that you're traveling, that we're doing this. could we take our women's soccer team along with us? And I'm like, yeah, sure. That's easy. All we got to take is a round ball, right? You don't have to take hats and helmets and cleats and all that. And I said, I'm sure we can find a game. Yeah, whatever you think. So Scott Oliver, I believe, was the coach, and they've continued to travel now every other year with us. But give me a little background, maybe an anecdote from that journey that you remember with the two teams.
I would encourage any of the teams that you deal with to do exactly what we did, and that was to encourage and then bring the women's soccer team. So now we had two teams. We had our men's football, and we also had ladies soccer. And, I think you see an uptick in personal behavior once you involve, both genders. I really do. I think people treat each other a little bit better. But what it did is it bonded this group together in a way that surprised everyone. It was even commented by our AD, a guy by the name of Fred Smith, and also our president, Sister Peg Albert. She showed up at one of the girls' soccer games, and she looked around. She said, Jim, the whole football team is here. And I said, well, Sister Peg, that's from a result of going to Italy together and being together. If you remember, Patrick, there was a night where we were asking all the kids to stay in. And as you and I were walking through the lobby of this hotel we're staying in, there's a group of about, it has to be a dozen, maybe more, playing a game of spoons.
Yep.
Guys on one side, girls on the other. And as we're watching, that number continued to grow. And now instead of one game of spoons, there were two games of spoons. And then there's this whole lobby was full with almost the entire teams. It was fabulous. And then the parents came down. And this was a group of parents and athletes that became very close and supported each other throughout the season. And it was great. 2 championship seasons, by the way.
Yeah,
yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Even better. Well, that's how things develop. And I can again, the terracotta tile floor, and it was in Siena. The town of Siena is where we were that night. And I think we had asked them to stay in because there might have been some people who stayed out a bit late the night before.
Yeah.
And they were kind of moaning about it. And then it turned into this. And, there was a lot of concern ahead of the trip going, how's this going to work? A bunch of guys, and a bunch of young women. And it was really special to see that these, highly trained, skilled, motivated athletes, male and female, playing spoons, just being kids in Italy somewhere. As you talk about this, and this comes to me a lot when people ask what I do, the real blessing of what I get to do and have done now for 25 years is I get to travel with really visionary coaches who get it, who understand that coaching football, coaching soccer, whatever, it's wins and losses, it's recruiting, it's keeping kids out, but there's so much more to the educational component. And I get coaches who are willing to go out of their box to take that on. And then I travel with these student athletes who are just curious about the world. They're at a day and age when they can look on their phone, think they're learning, but you're just seeing it in that little simple one dimension. Whereas when you're smelling, tasting, hearing, seeing, all of that. So I give you credit for taking that on as many times as you have.
Well,
Jim.
Thanks, Patrick. But the credit really goes to you because what you're in really is the relationship building business, and you can't. That's what life's all about. It's all about relationships. And I got to tell you, and you've been part of, very successful teams. Every successful team that we've been part of, they're great relationships. Kids are willing to put aside whatever differences they have and all look in the same direction and all get into lockstep and believe in one another. And that's what you've done over these years. That's just, it is a unbelievable imprint that you have on these young people's lives. We've talked before, but, just simple things. We took a group of kids from downtown Detroit, downtown Chicago. They had never been, maybe out of their city over to Italy. And a simple thing like breaking fresh Italian bread and dipping it into olive oil and balsamic vinegar and seeing their eyes light up like, oh my gosh, this is better than McDonald's. This is just to see that. And, to have these guys experience a 6-course meal, that's not happening at McDonald's.
It doesn't. And travel to me is just the best teacher, and doing it with young men, with great coaches. I've been jotting down a few words as, throughout this call, and some of them that just ring true. I just want to kind of throw back out there. The words character, integrity, leadership, the work ethic, the humility of a guy like Bo to go visit with you at your school, excellence and a sense of urgency. I think all of those are important today to anyone, no matter what they're doing in life, right?
What you do is you take all those lessons that we've learned, and if you're wise, you listen to the people who are older, people who've been there, they've had that experience, and they teach you over and over again why this is important. And then you have to put it into play every day at practice. And once you've done that, once you've put it into play, once you've seen it actually work itself out in your life, that's when you have a system of beliefs. That's when you know that, man, this stuff really works. I got to share this with people. And you can't keep it in. You can't contain it. You got to talk to people and say, listen to what we did. This is where we went. Here's what we saw. Mark Twain once said that if you want to, get rid of racism, travel. Once you see the world, you start to see the similarities in people. And he was right. Our kids always came back with a great perspective, a worldwide perspective of what a great place this can be.
We've got a lot of student athletes listening, a lot of coaches that this will last. How about a few words of wisdom that you like to impart on young men that you coach or that you're around?
Well, Patrick, I believe, just as you do, that football demands more teamwork than any other sport, just by sheer numbers and just by offense, defense, special teams, special situations. Everybody has to be on the same page. So I'd encourage people to learn how to work together, to be able to put aside differences and to work for a common goal. That's what made this country great. That's what will make your football team great. And then you got to understand that it's going to go by so quickly that you got to keep your eyes wide open. I used to tell my players, don't blink, because it's going to be over before you know it. And then the last thing I'd tell them is play this game with passion. Play it like your hair's on fire, man, because it's an opportunity to have all those emotions that sometimes you have to pen up, all that passion that sometimes we have to hold back. Now you can let it out. And it's the way the game's supposed to be played, with great enthusiasm, with, great intensity. And you're going to be praised for that rather than being told to quiet down. It's a great game, man.
Just live every day with that. Your hair's on fire. That makes a lot of sense. With great passion. Thank you, Coach Jim Lyall. Really appreciate getting to talk to you. Whenever we do, it's a blessing in my life.
Patrick, as always, a ton of takeaways from this one. You boil it down to a few for us here. What were your takeaways from your conversation?
Lives with his hair on fire, he's I've got a picture of him I'm looking at right now, just big, long guy, and he gets fired up. One of the things that comes strong to me through our discussion there was his emphasis on character and integrity. Anybody can physically get better, but what is your character? What's your integrity? What can we count on as a coach? What can I count on you in the tough times to tell me the truth of what you're seeing, to do what the right thing is? That's Coach Lyall through and through. He talks about the strong relationships within his team, and he really works to develop that. I've seen that on a number of our tours to different countries with Coach Lyall and his Adrian and his Siena Heights teams. That's one of the reasons he does those tours, because they develop incredible relationships among the players who are thrust into different environments, different languages, different cultures. And some of the different guys become leaders. Others may shirk a little bit. But Coach Lyall talks about that wherever you are. And that relationship builds into better performances on the field. And then he talks about passion. And life, that's another reason he and I get along so well. We both believe in living with passion. Nothing worse than a bored of life, right? And we all know some people like that, that just kind of go through life, as if it sucks. And it's about passion. It's about work ethic. And that drives the excellence. That fosters the winning mindset within the team. And Coach Lyall lives that and breathes it. And now he's retired, but he's still helping his son coach up in Michigan. And it's just how he lives and why he's been such a positive effect on college football.
Patrick, this has been an incredible series. Again, thank you for bringing it to us. I'm grateful I met you on that day in February there in Pittsburgh. This has been just a tremendous learning experience, and hearing from these coaches. I'm sure our coaches took a lot away from this as well. And my hope is that you get a lot of phone calls, that guys reach out to you, that you're not just limited to the 9 people we talked to over the course of this series, that there's going to be a lot more stories that come out of this series with you and what your work at Global Football and getting some teams across the country outside their own boundaries.
I live for the interaction with coaches. The reason I continue to do this, and we're celebrating in 2025, we'll be celebrating our 30th anniversary of Global Football. And the reason I continue to do it is, I love the interaction with the young men in a different environment, in a different culture. The first thing I always do on the bus when we meet them at the airport, I pull out my cell phone, and most of them are already looking at their phones, right? And I'll go, hey, eyes up here. Everybody's got one of these, right? And yes, sir. I said, put the dang thing in your pocket. You're not learning anything on the phone right now. Look around you. There's a billboard in a different language that you're trying to figure out what that is. There's sense you're gonna taste things that are different. You're gonna hear things. You're gonna see people. You're gonna have experiences. Just take that all in. And I love that moment with young men to see them delve into the cultures. And it's the coaches that I get to spend a lot of time with prior to the event. And then during that tour that we get to be good buddies. And the men we've talked and heard from throughout this series are all guys that I feel are special friends in many ways. So I want to keep developing those relationships. That's what keeps me young. Most of my buddies are retired. They made a lot more money and had, great lives and continue to have great lives. And I just live this the way I believe fits me, just with passion, with commitment, with excitement, with meeting people and taking them to some of the amazing places in the world. So it's all about getting to the summit. It's all about Kileleni every day.
Patrick, thank you again for bringing these conversations to Coaching Coordinator. I look forward to collaborating with you in the future, hearing more stories about the different places you're visiting with Global Football and the different teams and coaches you meet along the way. Coaches, I encourage you to reach out to Patrick and explore what you can do with your team. Patrick, you and I will talk more off air in the future, but again, thank you for your time here on this series.
Keep it going, Keith.